even without everyone going on. Just,
Okay. Okay. Now let's go. Yeah. Hello.
hi.
Hi. Yeah. Directional in Korean type design, and this first presenter I am Hyun Guk Ryu.
And I'm Aaron Bell from Microsoft.
Okay. Today we'll be presenting on directional in Korean type design. This long-standing issue in Korean typeface design, and we hope that our research in this field will encourage more this vision. Now to start with some background. Originally, Korean was writing with Chinese character top to bottom. It's right to left. With Chinese top to bottom, right to left. And Hangul was then invented. It borrowed some model. However, in the mid 20th century, due to increased American influence, this proliferation of the typewriters and the desire to differentiate from the Japanese Korea become a horizontal script. Of course, this change indicates this drafting of the verticality with an off-center baseline and portrait-like proportion. The top example is most akin to brush writing is Hangul, and follow the model most closely. The middle is more formalized, is from its Ming style. That is ventures away from its baseline is somewhat throat is still visibly Han. Han is the
Sorry, this third character here is Han. And what he's saying is that, like in this line, you can kind of see that the character is sort of living on this baseline and sort of falling off a little bit to the left. And that's actually the way Korean was designed for vertical scripts. So this one sort of has a similar feel where it's coming off to the left.
Okay. Coding movies more is this. Away from the usual model mode is scientifically, and as such is not meant for long-form text.
Okay. So, we've looked at this, basically the script that has vertical elements to it. It was originally designed to be vertical, and it's now being written horizontally. So, when we look at that kind of situation, we start to ask questions about it, like, well, how do we make Hangul more horizontal, or does it even need to be? Is this the way it should be? And sort of as a corollary, the interesting question is, well, can you do one that will work for both situations? So we've done some research and looked into a few historical models, and we're going to talk about that a bit today. So to start with, let's jump back to the late 1800s. This was a great time when Korean types were made in this sort of square format, also known as like precomposed syllables, where the entire glyph or the entire syllable would be on a single piece of metal type. This is, of course, a later example, which you can see was made from monotypes and casted, but in those days they would either be sand-casted or hand-carved. Of course, this was a very expensive and time-intensive process. So now we're going to talk about this group of French scholars and missionaries who were actually trying to produce documents that you were using Korean, but either they weren't in Korea or they didn't have the funds available to really help purchase this kind of stuff, so they kind of had to innovate and make up their own solutions. So this first one, by Léon de Rosny, is actually based in Paris. And I'm going to really butcher this French, so I'm sorry. He was in 1863, he started at the Institut National des Langues et Civilisations Orientales. Rob's laughing at me, I can see that. And so he put out this book that actually has some really, really early Korean types. So here's sort of what they were looking at. This was set, even though you have the horizontal English, the Korean was meant for vertical writing. So let's take a close example of this. So you can see, like, these are the four ones that we've then made really large over there. Now what's really interesting about this type is that each of these were actually separate components. They were separate pieces of metal type which you would then put together. Because this was meant for vertical writing, he didn't actually care if the proportions were perfect or if everything was exactly where it needed to be. He was actually just trying to cut as few of these pieces of metal type as necessary. So if you had like a long one, the long ones always look the same no matter where they are in the glyph. Of course, as I said, that produces some really weird results, but it's still readable. So I mean, huzzah to him. A second one we're going to look at is actually done by a group of missionaries, I believe in Yokohama.
Yes.
They arrived into Nagasaki and then they were working in Japan. And this book was actually aimed at talking about like the history and culture of Korea, but they also then later put out a French-Korean dictionary, which is a pretty impressive piece in and of itself. Now these, of course, were jovial fellows. But so they did some type like this, and it's a little hard to see. Sorry about the bad scan. But what's really interesting about this type, and I'll come back to this in a moment, is that it actually mixes two different styles. So instead of all these individual pieces that you had to shove together to create these letters, they go, you know what? We're going to create something that looks a little bit better. We're going to have a slightly higher quality by taking these square types and actually doing the entire syllable in and of itself on that piece of metal type. So what you end up with is a group of like some that look really nice, and then you have some in the middle here, these divisible types, which would actually be two pieces they'd stick together. So this is actually a nice compromise between having a reduced set of characters you have to produce and having a good proportion and balance in the characters. And so when you look at it, it actually kind of looks kind of nice. And they actually based this on... Oh, geez, okay. Anyway, so they based this on handwriting. And it's kind of an interesting thing. Now, as a quick corollary, since we're actually running a bit low on time, is this this piece, which is actually an unbroken type. Now, I've never seen this before. It's quite fascinating. But this was done in metal, and this is similar to Arabic. They've taken handwriting concepts and cast out individual sections. See, the lines there are the breaks in the characters. Now, as far as we know, this is only used for this one document. So you could say it's a form of lettering, but on the other hand, it's pretty awesome. So the last piece we're going to look at is the one by Camille Huart, who is was also based in Paris, and he actually looked at the same types as we looked at earlier from Rosny. And so he's like, all right, we're going to do this again, but we're going to do it horizontally this time. So let's just sort of play with this a little bit. Now, instead of having these separate components, he actually put them into these square blocks. And there was a couple of reasons for this. If we compare the two, you can see that the heights are now more normalized in Huart's examples, and actually the proportions are now better placed as well. So the end result is you actually have a nicer character set that will work better in a horizontal typesetting, even though you then have the payoff of having to do more syllables. The only example at the top, which is a bit different, is that he's decided to combine this top one into two pieces, the top into two, and then have an additional set at the bottom just to help reduce just somewhat. It's not ideal, but it actually does help improve the overall design of these characters. So let's get back to this earlier question that we had. So can Hangul design be work both vertically and horizontally? Well, yeah. Well, no. Like all types, whenever we create something that will work in one situation and you try to apply it to another, it's going to look bad. We could create a type that would be perfectly square and it would be perfectly bidirectional, but just the quality of the glyph is just going to be bad. The syllable's going to be bad. No one's going to want to use it. So really, create a jack of all trades, master of none. So this other question, this core issue of is it even necessary? How do we do it? Well, I don't know. The real problem is that we need a lot more exploration, need a lot more experimentation to determine whether or not this is going to be successful, and most importantly, if it's going to be accepted by the Korean populace. People like to read most what they like to read best what they read the most, and currently that means looking at this vertical baseline off-centered with the portrait proportions. But what about this? How would that work? How would that apply in a Korean situation? And so that's an area that we're going to keep looking into and sort of see what we come up with, because it'll be interesting to see if this is actually acceptable, how that could change the type industry in Korea. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
You have the mic.
Did you address where this off-centered baseline comes from?
It comes from handwritten styles, and it's sort of in the traditional form. Let's go back to this one, actually.
Okay.
So when you're writing in letters in Korean, they tend to have this sort of slightly off-centered to the right baseline. And that just, as you're writing like that, that was just the way it tended to look, instead of the very Chinese square-like forms.
Okay, so this comes from the formation of the character.
Yes. At least in the
The
traditional sense.
order in which the strokes are written, it just tends to fall on it.
Yeah, because it tends to be gets written a bit like this, and so it made sense to have this sort of line on the right side.
Thank you.
Is your work based on the complaint from a certain sector of Korean readers?
Not really. This is more of just experiment and exploration, saying, well, we imagine letters to look this way. When we're creating a Latin typeface, we imagine, we have this idea in our head of this is what Latin should look like. But what if you said, okay, well, what would a Latin look like if at an early stage we convert it to vertical? How would it change? How would the feel of it change? At ATypI last year, a group of folk from Japan actually did this with hiragana. It was a fascinating little presentation that they put together. But our sense of this is just sort of more of a play, or just see what will happen. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, well, okay, that's fine too. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you so much.
Okay.